Fellow Democrat Joe Manchin told Fox News that he would vote against the measure, citing the cost of the bill amid rising inflation. The White House has accused Manchin of going back on his commitments to the president after months of negotiations. The bill, which includes billions of dollars for child care, education, and measures to curb climate change, would need all 50 Democratic votes in the evenly divided Senate to pass. Windsor Johnston, NPR News, Washington.
President Biden is expected to address the nation on Tuesday amid a surge of new coronavirus cases in the U.S. As NPR's Mara Liveson reports, the president will speak about the importance of testing and booster shots to curb the rapid spread of infections driven by the new Omicron variant.
With the number of COVID infections skyrocketing because of the new Omicron variant, the president is expected to intensify his efforts to convince people to get vaccinated. And that now means getting a booster shot as well when eligible. Studies have shown that people who have been vaccinated and boosted are protected against severe disease. But the president is not expected to call for a return to shutdowns and school closures. Last week, the administration announced a new protocol for schools that would allow students who have been exposed to COVID but test negative to stay in the classroom. Mara Liveson, NPR News.
Business groups, religious groups in 27 U.S. states are urging the Supreme Court to block the Biden administration's nationwide vaccine mandate for large businesses. They asked the court to put on hold an appeals court decision Friday to allow the mandate to take effect. The Biden administration, meanwhile, continues its push to have everyone vaccinated. Speaking with NPR's Morning Edition today, Dr. Anthony Fauci says they hope to reach one group in particular.
The most vulnerable people in society are those who have never been vaccinated. And there's going to be a very strong urge to get people who have not yet been
follow
vaccinated.
the order.
There are about 50 million of them in this country who are eligible to be vaccinated, who have not yet
Follow in line, follow in line. This is Hitler speaking.
With them to get vaccinated.
Former President Donald Trump is suing New York Attorney General Letitia James.
I bet you are,
Trump wants
nigger.
to stop a state civil fraud investigation of his business practices.
I bet
James
you
is
are.
planning
You
to
want your
question
money
Trump
back,
about
bitch.
accusations that his company's manipulated the valuation of its real estate properties.
Ah, fuck
You're listening to NPR News.
Fucking bitch. I want my money back.
Dozens of flights out of Brussels airport have been canceled as the city's namesake airline has gone on strike. Trade unions say they're overworked and that negotiations have been fruitless.
Well, they are overworked. The fuck do you mean?
Management of Brussels Airlines threatened unions that if they didn't call off the 24-hour strike, they'd be sued for the cost of the flight cancellations, estimated at about $2.8 million. Workers decided to go ahead with the move during high travel season, saying they've been stretched too thin by coronavirus-related absences and that their pleas for more work-life balance and better conditions have been ignored. Passengers inconvenienced by the cancellations have been rescheduled on flights operated by Brussels Airlines' parent company, Lufthansa,
terrorism
or
works.
refunded their money. For NPR News, I'm Terry Schultz in Brussels.
You
Jury
follow my
deliberations
orders.
have begun on the trial of the suburban Minneapolis police officer who
Oh,
says she
bitch.
meant to use her taser instead of her gun when she
Man, I don't
shot
want to hear that
and killed
bitch.
Dante Wright
She's dead.
during an
Hopefully
attempted
she's
arrest.
dead.
In closing arguments today, the
She needs to
prosecutor said
die.
former officer Kim Potter made a blunder of epic proportions. Potter's attorney, in turn, said that everyone makes mistakes and making a mistake is not a crime. Drug maker Moderna says a booster shot of its COVID-19 vaccine will offer vaccinated
She
people
made a
some
mistake
protection
living.
against the latest coronavirus variant. Moderna says lab
Fuck
tests
all
show
that.
the booster shots now being used increased by 37 times the levels of antibodies able to fight the Omicron variant. The Biden administration is releasing a rule today that would raise auto mileage standards
Rules,
starting
follow
with the
the rules,
2023
chaos
model
and
year.
order.
That rule is an effort to significantly reduce emissions of planet-warming greenhouse gases from vehicles.
Caskets. That's right. Greenhouse caskets.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Novo Nordisk, working to improve the lives of people with obesity through knowledge, science, and
Say the
compassion.
truth. Greenhouse
Because
caskets.
obesity
That's
is a
right.
matter of biology, not just willpower.
Don't be afraid.
More at truthaboutweight.com.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for Here and Now. We will get to the program in just a few seconds. I'm Jonathan Wilson, in for Jerry Mitchell. A quick reminder that at 4 o'clock, we've got All Things Considered as usual on the program this afternoon. The Biden administration is spending more than $250 million on launching a new three-digit mental health crisis phone line. That story and much more
wasting more
on
money,
All Things
wasting
Considered here
more
on
money.
WAMU 88.5. Again, that's from 4 to 8.
From NPR and WBUR, I'm Tanya Mosley in Los Angeles. And I'm Celeste Headley in Washington, D.C. It's Here and Now. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said today he'll push forward the Democrats' domestic spending plan despite losing a crucial vote. That vote was Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who told Fox News yesterday he can't support Biden's Build Back Better bill.
I cannot vote to continue with this piece of legislation.
It's a piece of trash.
I've tried everything humanly possible. I can't get there.
Manchin's announcement came after months of negotiations. It could spell the end of the Democrats' agenda in Congress for some time. NPR congressional correspondent Kelsey Snell joins us. Kelsey, what's going on here? Why would Chuck Schumer put the Build Back Better plan up for a vote, even though he knows, I assume he doesn't have the votes he needs without Manchin?
Because he's retarded.
I think there are a couple of things happening here. One is that Schumer has a lot of pressure from some very, very angry Democrats within his caucus. There are, the vast majority of them really wanted to move this bill. It really was Manchin and potentially Kirsten Sinema of Arizona who had lingering concerns about these bills. And many of these members say that they have been campaigning on these policies, that they need to campaign on these policies next year, and that they believe in things like the child tax credit as a way to help alleviate child poverty.
Jeez, why don't we do an oxygen tax too, bitch?
And universal pre-K, and they want the opportunity to vote on them. They want the opportunity to tell their voters and the public where they stand.
Vote for the devil, fuck you.
Where there is this desire from some Democrats to make an example of Manchin, and they want him to have to stand up under the pressure of a full Senate vote and say that he definitively will not allow this major piece of his party's agenda to move forward. Manchin cited inflation and the national debt in his statement against the bill. Do economists support his opinions? Well, there are some conflicting thoughts about this, and I will say that, Manchin cites inflation and debt, but he also talks about a number of other reasons why he has concerns with this bill. I think there has been some focus on that element of it, but it would be ignoring the more holistic view of what Manchin is saying here to say
the
that
slave report is this.
Inflation are his primary concerns here. One of the things that he talks about often is he thinks that Democrats want to make many elements of this bill permanent, and he doesn't think that the way that they're framing this as a one-year bill is the most responsible way to be messaging about the legislation. Though, Democrats that I've talked to say in many ways parts of this bill were scaled back to be one-year extensions of programs or short-term versions of programs under pressure from Manchin himself in earlier rounds of negotiations. That in some ways, the things he's complaining about were concessions that Democrats made to him weeks and months ago. But is there a chance that the Democrats will revive other parts of the Build Back Better bill and try to pass? Well, that is what they're attempting to do right now. They're kind of huddling, and they have a meeting sometime tomorrow, a meeting among Senate Democrats to kind of discuss their path forward. But there has been a significant loss of trust here, and many Democrats that I've talked to feared all along that Manchin might, move the goalpost, might decide that he's not willing to go along with this bill. And it would be very difficult for some of them to now agree to continue new negotiations with him on new versions of this bill. So while it is possible that Democrats could, attempt to resurrect some of this, they would have to do a lot of trust rebuilding and have more conversations among themselves.
Fuck all that. We need a president, not trust rebuilding.
And how they want to interact with Manchin, who many of them are very angry with.
This is not a particularly great time for this. If you're in the Biden administration, Biden's poll numbers have fallen. COVID cases are on the rise. Does the president have the political capital that he needs to get any of this through Congress? That is a really significant question, and one that I think we're going to see the answer to play out over the next several weeks. There was some clear indication from Manchin in an interview he did with local radio that he is himself frustrated with the White House staff and the way they handle this. So there's going to have to be some both political and policy recovery done on the White House side of this, and that's the part that I'm going to be watching very closely, because as much as Senate leaders can try to find a path forward,
we twerk, and we fuck citizens of USA.
And it will be very much up to the White House to figure out how to move forward, not just with Manchin, but with other members of his party who are frustrated and who were expecting the White House to really deliver the votes. NPR congressional correspondent Kelsey Snell. Thanks so much, Kelsey. Thanks for having me.
Well, the primary election for Georgia's next governor is still months away, but Republicans are gearing up for a contest that will test the GOP's resolve in one of the most competitive political battlegrounds of 2022. Several Republicans have already entered the race to challenge incumbent Brian Kemp, and Stacey Abrams says she'll seek the Democratic nomination again after losing to Kemp in 2018. Recently, we heard from two organizers who are registering black and brown voters in Georgia. You can hear that conversation at hereandnow.org. Today, we have Chuck Clay with us. He's a former Republican state senator and former chair of the Republican Party of Georgia. Chuck, welcome to Here and Now.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. First, there are several candidates running for the Republican primary for governor in Georgia. The highest profile, as we know so far, are incumbent Brian Kemp and former Senator David Perdue. You are friends with both, but have not financially supported either of them through this cycle. With Democrats winning both Senate races and the presidential race in the state, how are you thinking about how to mobilize Republican support in Georgia?
Well, some of it is obviously traditional. You have to have candidates and campaigns that galvanize voters, excite voters, and draw voters in. The untraditional, I think the Democrats this last cycle,
We got
they
gobbling
have
going
done
on.
better in truly getting grassroots turning out voters. And so, in a general sense, Republicans need to be a little more focused on those kinds of voter registration and voter turnout, maybe in a little more sophisticated, directly and indirectly, social media, internet, and other ways that people do now.
Chicken gobbler
Chuck, let's break
talking.
down
Holy
both of
shit.
those strategies. Let's start with the traditional one. What issues are most important to Republican voters in Georgia?
Well, I think the paramount thing to remember is really a very wise friend of mine once said that being governor of Georgia is much akin to being a president of a very, very large chamber of commerce. So first and foremost, state races are about state issues, economic growth, jobs, roads, security, public safety, schools. Are the roads better where I am? Is public safety better or worse where I am?
I mean, we can't overestimate or underestimate the Trump factor. Governor Kemp has faced backlash from former President Donald Trump for refusing to overturn the election results in Georgia during the 2020 election. Perdue is a Trump loyalist. How are you advising the candidates on their strategy appealing to Republican voters without alienating Trump supporters? How important is that in this 2022 race?
Well, it'll be critical. I mean, it is a key and an underlying issue that will play out. But if I'm Brian Kemp, you first want to accentuate your conservative credentials. If I'm Perdue, yeah, you want to tap into that anger, that discontent that is obviously and palpably there. Again, look at the Youngkin model in Virginia. You don't want to get so close that you risk really alienating voters in the general election, but you've got to tap into that enough to have an effective campaign while